Okay, congratulations. Another great award winner, and it's awesome for someone who's working with our adult learners. Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage MindSpark Learning, a global nonprofit that works with organizations to identify solutions to their biggest problems of practice. MindSpark worked with a cross-sector of agencies and local entities last year to support better alignment for children across the state. We're going to hear about how MindSpark upskills individuals to solve their own problems within their systems. Please welcome to the stage Kiki Huckabee, Chris Jones, Sean Huss, and Sarah Call.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today. I want to start by quoting one of my role models in education, Rita Pearson. In her 2013 TED Talk, she stated, "Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best they can possibly be." If you have not seen this TED Talk, I encourage you to watch it. It's one of my favorites. But these are really the building blocks for success: connection and relationships. Throughout my career as a classroom teacher and my current role as Chief Impact Officer at MindSpark, I have had the privilege of working with state officials, districts, and schools all across the country. The common denominator I have observed is that people are your greatest resource. As you all know, right? We know this with kids. If we invest in upskilling and empowering people to solve the problems they face on a daily basis, we would be fueled by determination, innovation, and resilience. MindSpark is a national nonprofit that upskills education systems by activating human capital to solve some of our largest problems that exist. We know that education is the single most important investment for people, planet, and prosperity. We also believe that education, especially public education, is not a broken system. In fact, it is very redeemable and is the foundation to every other sector that exists. In 2022, MindSpark began our work here in North Dakota with our Education Accelerator. We brought together educators and health and human service workers to identify problems facing children, families, and communities across the state. We realized that there are many resources here in this great state, but without the network of people rallying around families to support those holistic needs, many of those needs were going unmet. Through some gap analysis and digging into the root causes of those gaps, we identified a goal for the cohort to tackle, which was to create a model of care and intervention that supports families in Williston through universal prevention, community-based intervention, and a psychological care team. Each month, we met with a cohort of about 40 individuals and created actionable steps to tackle this problem head-on. Through creative abrasion, agility, and resolution, we unleashed the capacity to create common vocabulary among two entities, built systems that were able to work together instead of against one another, and opened pathways for communication that allowed for responsiveness rather than a blanket approach. MindSpark prides itself on being a beacon of ingenuity in a realm of problem solving. Unlike traditional models that impose solutions from a top-down approach, we embrace a paradigm shift, a model that empowers people to forge their paths to a resolution. At its heart lies the profound belief that individuals possess an inherent capacity to confront challenges head-on and unearth innovative solutions that resonate with their unique context. By equipping individuals with the skills, knowledge, and tools necessary to identify, analyze, and address their unique challenges, MindSpark not only solves immediate problems, but also instills a lifelong aptitude for independent problem solving. Now, this does not come without its own challenges, and believe me, I wish that we had all the answers, but we do not. But really, it's about embracing that human-centered problem solving, really focusing on a journey rather than an end result, and being okay with failure and making adjustments along the way. I have some amazing individuals up here who are going to talk about some of those pivots that we had to make along the way. And it's really about being humble enough to say, I don't know the answer to this, but together we can figure it out. In the pursuit of transformative change in education and beyond, cultivating change agents is pivotal. As James Comer wisely noted, no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. Just as a champion in education believes in the potential of every child, MindSpark believes in the inherent capacity of individuals to affect change in their communities. By fostering meaningful connections, building relationships, and providing the tools to analyze and address challenges, Individuals are empowered to become not just problem solvers, but agents of lasting change. As we think about the building blocks of success, I challenge you to consider how you will cultivate change agents. I know that you all do that in your classroom every single day with kids, but how might you do it with peers? To foster that connection and pursue innovative solutions that can pave the way for a brighter and more equitable tomorrow. So I'm going to pass it off to my wonderful panelists over here. And first, I would love for you all to introduce yourselves. And then we're going to talk about and hear about some of the work that we did in this education accelerator and really how did we overcome some of those barriers and what is the work, kind of the next steps to be done. So Chris, I'm going to start with you.
So Chris Jones, Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Awesome.
Sarah Call, Senior Director, Professional Learning and Development at MindSpark.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Huss. I'm the Special Education Director in the Williston area for a multi-district special ed unit serving 11 school districts.
Awesome. So I would love to hear from you all starting this education accelerator process, what is the actual problem that you set out to solve? How did you approach it? And then what were some of those successes that happened along the way?
So I think for me, the biggest thing is it's always who's going to solve the behavioral health crisis in schools. And that, I mean, if you've been around Bismarck, you know that that's the question that's always asked, and we seem to look at it like, well, let's just do a program, put some money in a program, and expect something to happen. Well, I think you learn anything in human-centered design, and it's never going to work. So let's try something new, something with MindSpark, primarily work with K-12, but let's look holistically at the kids that are in the schools, their families that are in the schools, and how do we support one another? And really, my favorite word is the creative abrasion. I know we're adults and we all think that we embrace conflict, but I don't think we do well enough or often enough to drive solutions. So just didn't want to walk down the halls of the Capitol and say we need to solve behavioral health in schools, throw some money at it. It was, we need to roll up our sleeves and figure it out.
And I think using the people that are in the communities and in the schools to do the work. It's very hard to change your mindset. We are all, experts in our own realms or in our classrooms, but to really switch that mindset to creativity and allowing you to come into a space with maybe not your peers that you work with every day, but the people that are solving the same problems as you, maybe in a different capacity. How do you learn to speak the same language? How do you learn to do creative abrasion with one another and really drive your ideas and what you want to see happening in your schools and systems and for families?
And let's be honest, if any one of us had the answer, we would have solved it by now. So there were a few of us that were getting together year after year. We would always identify a handful of students. It was never more than a handful of students that we were struggling with, that we knew that we weren't providing what we needed to provide for those students. And we felt like we were just stuck. And whether it was with human services, social services, the education entities, the state, we all felt like we were stuck. We didn't have a direction to go with these students, and we felt like the students were failing given our lack of ability to figure it out. So there were a few of us that had gotten together, and we wanted to identify a group, a team, and Commissioner Jones, Superintendent Baszler certainly got involved and helped us create this team. And for me, it's about a continuum. We need a continuum of support services that catch all the students where they're at. And I think as education entities, I think we're really good at the beginning of that continuum, the least restrictive piece, and the end of the continuum, the most restrictive piece, with maybe some argument there. But there's a lot of things that I think identified in the middle of this continuum that helped us kind of fill those gaps, and it's still a work in progress.
I think you guys bring up this huge piece of relationships and building that connection between two entities, and really this piece of, problem solving and being a little messy together, right? We don't all have the answers. We don't know what the answer is, but it's really about creating kind of that holistic approach to supporting students. Tell us about some of the barriers that happened through the EA. How did you overcome them, or how are you still overcoming them?
Well, I think, the barriers still remain, how do you build that trust? I mean, everybody wants to do what's best for that kid and that family, and they want to solve the problem. They want to fix the problem. And oftentimes you can't fix it And when you have your perception, you know, a lot of the work, I believe, that happens in human services and in schools is a function of your own upbringing and your own education and your own experiences. And it's become so much more diverse in terms of what is actually necessary to sit and listen. I mean, not only listen to the peers across that system of services, but also like, how do you listen to the family? How do you listen to the kids? Because even a teacher or an educator may be listening for different things than someone in social services, than someone in behavioral health. How do we take those cues and really support that child and that family going forward?
And going along with that, I think just mentioning the fact that there is a lot of misconceptions and there is a lot of blame. When you're in human-centered work like we all are in education, it's more than just your head, it's your heart. So how do you get your head and your heart to speak, not only to yourself, but to others? And then how does that transfer to students and families? I think one of the most powerful things we saw within this Education Accelerator was bringing a family in who has been through the system, both on the school side and on the human services side, and got to tell their story in front of both entities in a room. It was very powerful because you got to hear directly from people, your stakeholders who are getting your services at school and in human health, and just the eye-opening kind of way you can look at a problem more holistically and as an entity, as a group, to solve it, rather than just like, hey, you're doing that, I think you should be doing this, I'm doing too much, but I can't not do it. So I think the struggle is that shift in that mindset and that shift of working together and coming up with a commonality to how you're going to solve the problems.
I say this a little bit jokingly now, but at the time it really kind of frightened me a little bit. When MindSpark first came in, we did a 2-day, you call it a training?
Kickoff.
And throughout those 2 days, I felt like we were preparing for a street fight. Like we were going to fight with human services and social services. And by the end of that second day, what I realized was that we were all on the same page. We all had the same common goal in mind of supporting the students, but we were so busy blaming each other for that lack of student success that we were a little bit blinded.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece, is building that trust amongst the cohort. And I know, Sean, you say that jokingly, but it really was, that 2-day kickoff was like, how do we build trust with each other, right? Because everyone has the common goal of supporting kids. Absolutely. In what ways have you prioritized relationship or connection and upskilling people after the EA has ended? What has it looked like kind of since it's ended in the last couple of months? How has the work kind of progressed?
Well, I can tell you that, so this is one thing that I need to mention is when MindSpark would come in, they would come in we did the 2-day kickoff, and then it was a day a month. And one of the struggles that we had, and it was nobody's fault, but one of the struggles that we had was we would come to MindSpark and then we'd have all these great intentions to go back and get in our groups and continue the work. And what would happen is we would all go back to our jobs and we would go about our daily lives and kind of forget about MindSpark until the next time it came. That's a little bit of an extreme response there. It wasn't completely like that, but it was. And that's a little bit what it is now. So what we've done is we've hired somebody to facilitate and keep us together. So one of the job responsibilities is to continue this monthly work so it doesn't get pushed aside, because it's very easy to push it aside given the job responsibilities that everybody has.
I agree with that. I think it's a golden thread, right? If you don't water it, it's not going to grow. So if you don't spend time on it, nothing will change. So I think the key there is having structures in place to support the work outside of just us coming in. MindSpark, we do come in and we offer support, we offer suggestions, but we're not going to blanket say this is what's going to work for you, right? We're not in your communities, we're not in your cities, we're not in your schools. That's all you. So really pushing people to take that on themselves was a challenge, but also a huge reward when you saw people feeling empowered enough to kind of look past the boundaries and the rules that are in place for all of us within our roles and look at how we can come together human-centered to do the work.
Yeah, and I would just add, I wasn't able to do it throughout the whole period because shame on me, Superintendent Baser, we scheduled it then also to finish up during legislative session, and that just didn't really work out. But it's somewhat, it's another barrier and something going forward. I mean, Superintendent Baser and I were involved because we wanted to create a culture of, you solve this problem. We will support you. We will help remove barriers if they even exist. I think this idea that barriers even exist is not entirely accurate. But how do then we engage with everyone to say, no, we really want you to solve the problem. We're not kicking it to you. What we're telling you is that you are the experts in the room, and just getting that belief that if they did it, it would be okay. And I don't think it's necessarily a culture of human services, social services, or schools. It's just where it's at, because it's always been state solve this problem. It's not the state's problem to solve. I don't mean that condescendingly. It's the community's problem to solve, and we should just be facilitating the reduction in barriers, the reduction in bureaucracy, whatever barrier exists for you as a community of professionals to do what's best for kids and families, and feel like you're making a difference with the work that you do every day.
And we saw that mind shift throughout the year. At the end of our sessions, I believe there were still some people that were saying, well, the state needs to do this, or they need to do that. And we had a complete mind shift through that year in terms of, we need to take this on and we need to figure it out. We need to be creative. Governor Burgum talked about curiosity today. We need to be curious about what can we do to add to that intervention or that intervention care continuum to help students be successful.
Kind of our last question here, I want to know, what advice might you give to other people going through a similar process? This idea of tackling really complex problems, right? Because they're complex, otherwise we would have a solution, but really complex problem, and digging in and saying, what are some of those root causes and how do we solve them? What advice would you give to individuals diving into this process in the future?
Right off the top of my head, and obviously this is a personal opinion, but you need a facilitator. I can't imagine the group that we had, and we had a great turnout. We had about 45 people coming in from social, human, and education. To have us all come into a room and say, solve this problem with no facilitator, it would not have worked, in my opinion. We needed somebody from the outside to come in and facilitate and help us build that relationship and trust before we were able to move forward. And honestly, building that relationship and trust took us a lot longer than what we expected.
And to know this work isn't a checkbox. You know, you're not going to go through this in 6 months and say, check it off, we solved the problem. So you have to be comfortable with being able to iterate and change and make those pivots in the moment. And I think that can be scary and that can be fearful for some, because we are dealing with humans and we're dealing with little humans that we care so much about. So just really, I think, expanding our viewpoint of how we can actually implement change quickly and be able to iterate on our prototypes and our designs in a way that's going to be inclusive for all and gives you the time too to say, hey, we failed at this, but let's come back together, let's discuss, and let's move forward, and let's change it up.
Yeah, and I think, to be super blunt, you don't put the people in the room because of their title. You put them in the room based on either their potential for leadership or their informal leadership today. I think all too often it's like, well, so-and-so is the director of this, they have to be there. You have to get the people in there that actually want to do it and can think. And I mean, and again, nothing against old people. I'm getting old now too. But you get stuck in your ways. And you have to say, okay, let's do this together. I was just thinking about, like, how did we allocate capital when I worked in healthcare? And we had all these formulas, financial methods, but it was also like, what is the bench strength of the leadership team? You all know who your rising stars are. Put them in the room and let them succeed and let them grow. Because frankly, it's a retention strategy on top of actually getting your work done. So I think that is really important. You pick for the person, not the position.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you all so much. If you are interested in learning more, we do have a breakout session, but I appreciate your guys' time today, and I hope you have a wonderful start to the school year, whatever role you're in. Thank you for all that you all do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.